everybody. So today I'm going to be talking about Flam rudiments. Now, this is probably one of the more tricky rudiments to teach simply because it can be confusing for students to hear two sounds but associated as one rudiment. So for example, whenever I tell students, okay, am I playing two notes or one note? Most students will say, oh, you're playing two notes, but I have to explain to them, okay, everybody, today we're actually going to learn something different. We're learning that two notes or three notes can be considered as one. And so whenever I teach this, I always like to start in the upwards position, and I always like to have my hands preset to the grace note and the primary note whenever we're playing these flam or honestly drag rudiments. So if I'm doing a right hand flam and I'm teaching that, I always like to have my students put their hands in the correct position before we even play on the drum. And so I'll have my students have their sticks floating in the air like this. Make sure that they're using their wrist and not their arms to be way up here. I'll say, okay, everybody, I want to see everyone's hands match mine. And then I will literally go down the line and make sure that the grace note is not too high or there's not too big of a difference between the grace note and the primary note. Those are the big things that I would like for you to watch out for whenever you're teaching this to your beginning percussionists. So as soon as they've got both sticks in the correct position, one major thing I want you to try to look out for is whenever you tell them to drop the sticks down, I've honestly had quite a few students that even though the left hand is the one that's closer to the drum, the right hand will be the one that strikes the drum first. So remember, teach them a little. You could even incorporate a little lesson about gravity here if you wanted to incorporate stuff about science. Is that you have to ask them, okay, everybody, if the left hand is lower to the drum than the right hand, which hand do you think should strike the drum first? And then the obvious answer should be the shorter left hand, so it should sound like this. Now, once your students have gotten this, I would recommend go ahead and just practice just one flam at a time. So you can do a little Simon Says game, my turn, your turn. You can say, okay, everybody, it's my turn, just watch. Okay, now it's your turn. Ready, go, boom, and then you can have them practice like that. One small detail that's actually pretty big is that you should also be training your students on what a good flam sounds like. So what a good flam sounds like is two notes that are pretty close to each other but not exactly on top of each other. That's called having a closed flam. In more rudimental music like Sousa marches and stuff like that, the ornamentation could be expanded a little bit, so that way it's a little bit more of an open sound. Now, whenever you're teaching this, I always recommend teaching them the more closed version first. That way it gets them thinking of that nice tight flam sound that's more appropriate in common wind band repertoire music. So if you can train them to, right off the bat, associate the closed flam as a more appropriate beginning flam, that's going to help them out later on. It just adds a little bit more crispness to the sound, and it creates more excitement in the music. Whenever you're teaching flams, again, I recommend starting with just one hand at a time. So if we're just doing 4 on the right hand, the way I like to teach this as well is I like to have the students think of the snare drum as a stove. So coming off the drum head is going to help the sound be more crisp and articulate. Just like that. Whenever you're teaching flam accents or flam taps, again, I recommend breaking this down to one unit at a time. Don't try to play the whole thing right off the bat. So if I'm working on flam accents, I would play just the first grouping first. Stop. Have them do it again. Once that gets perfected, just do the other hand now. So the left hand version. Again. Only once your students have really gotten the hang of this, then I would incorporate mixing both hands. Where a lot of teachers fall off the boat is moving too quickly, too fast. That's why one of the big things I'm talking about in this whole lecture series is quality over quantity on which are the most important rudiments that your students are going to be seeing on a frequent basis. Same thing with the flam tap. I recommend just doing one hand at a time. So if we're just doing the right hand flam tap, it would sound like this. Again. Once that gets comfortable, then move on to the left hand. Again. I know it seems painstakingly slow to do this at the beginning, but I recommend that if you do this, your time will be well spent because you're teaching your students like the correct muscle memory. If they try to do this too quickly, you're gonna have this open like popcorn type sound, and you're gonna be spinning your wheels because that's not the characteristic sound that we're looking for this rudiment on these instruments.